I'm David Pinsoff,
I'm David Pietraszewski.
and this is Evolutionary Psychology, the podcast where actual evolutionary psychologists
Do
talk about,
actual evolutionary psychology.
yeah, they do it and they talk about it. Enjoy.
It's great. David, today we have a very special guest.
Who is that guest?
It's me, David. It's me.
Wow.
So I'm really not a guest.
No, you're one of the co-hosts, but you're also a guest in this episode. And it is our first solo episode with just the two of us in a long time. And
Oh yeah, really long
I
time.
was
Yeah.
missing having those because I always have a blast just doing one-on-one convos with you. And I think this one was no exception to that rule of those conversations being a blast. And what do we talk about in this one?
We had no choice but to talk about, oh, that's a bad joke, free will.
Yeah, that's right. All the implications, the philosophy, the psychology, the ethics, everything there is that revolves around this topic of free will. It's a topic that energizes people in kind of an unexpected way for how abstruse and technical it is. Like people get really fired up about it and engaged in this question of whether or not we have free will, and so we get into why
Yeah,
we as
the
humans are. Yeah,
theory. Yeah, yeah. Anybody whose sort of eyes are rolling back in the back of their head and they're like, "Oh my God, I don't want to listen to this." Um, I think this is a very different conversation. It really it cuts to an adaptationist approach to free will, and as David said, there's a theory of why people feel strongly or feel anything about this, and that's part of the theory too. So if you have if you think you hate free will as an enterprise of sort of human inquiry, this episode might also be for you.
exactly. I think it's for people who love the free will debate and hate the free will debate in equal measure.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, this was a really fun one. You will have no choice but to enjoy it.
Thanks, David. All right, David, I hit record
All right, we did it. It's our first solo episode in a long
a
time.
long time. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
and
I'm already pre exhausted from talking about what we're going to talk about today.
yeah, the pre-podcast discussion already.
Oh, yeah, no, but no, but specifically free will. So there's like a quote from I think it's Rumi, who's like a Persian poet. I mean, if people know, I'm sure whatever century he was, 12th century or something, I don't know.
Mhm.
And it said it's basically like this is a disputation that will, occupy mankind until like the sun explodes,
Oh
and
no.
that is against the partisans and necessitarians of free will or something like that.
Oh man.
So
I mean,
it's been millennia.
I guess we're fulfilling Rumi's prophecy
Yeah,
against our own free will. It's fate that
exactly.
we're doomed to just.
We couldn't do otherwise. Yeah. So
Yeah, exactly.
so David, I've been foolishly tackling free will. There's two parts to it. One is theoretical, conceptual. The other one is empirical.
Okay.
And I'm just going to let you ask questions because there's so much to talk about, and
Oh, I'm
I
so
only want to take
excited.
about 5 minutes. So yeah, we can do a five
Honestly, I'm
minute
excited to
episode.
learn things about
Okay,
this
good.
because I find this topic inherently interesting. I also find your research and your perspective interesting, and so I'm happy to marry these two things. And I wasn't even aware there was empirical stuff, so I'm excited to learn about.
Yeah, we're in the
Um,
middle. We're about to run it. In
mhm.
fact, we actually just started piloting it, but we have an enormous bank of studies planned. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, so I guess the first thing I want to ask is like, it's kind of an unusual topic for an evolutionary psychologist. You know,
Mm.
when people think about free will, they think about philosophy. It's not usually the type of thing that an evolutionary psychologist would study. So, what business do you have nosing your way into this millennia-long debate?
Yeah, none, none.
None.
No, I mean, yeah, that is the actual answer. But in some sense, this goes in the category too of um, somebody commented in one of our recent yeah about how many times I say on YouTube. So I really have to cut out my ums. I don't usually say when I'm teaching, but I think there's something about the
We all
Zoom
have our
format.
ticks.
I
Yeah,
know.
my favorite is so
Okay.
maybe
Yeah.
maybe I'll start saying and you can say instead.
Great. Yeah. So I have no business is the short answer. The long answer is that as an adaptationist, I have business inquiring into any aspect of human existence that is caused by adaptations, and specifically any concept that a human being is appealing to ultimately is a product of some constellation of adaptations. So when we talk about, you know, my mother or a chair or free will, part of being an adaptationist is saying, look, there's an organism that has a representation of something. And as an adaptationist, my job, if I want to be responsible for explaining this slice of reality, is to figure out what slice of all of the adaptations in this organism are causing them to be able to represent the mother or the chair, or in this case, free will. And that third one is one I just picked off. So in that sense, I am allowed as an adaptationist in the sense that all human activity, which includes scientific and philosophical inquiry, is up for grabs when you're an adaptationist.
I love that perspective. I wish it were more common. Um, you know, humans are animals. Philosophy and philosophizing is one of the things that we as animals do. Animals are bundles of adaptations and their byproducts. And if we want to understand something like philosophy or philosophizing, we need to understand how it emerges from the adaptations and their byproducts. And I see no alternative to understanding philosophical discourse except in those terms. It kind of would be unsettling for the participants in the philosophical discourse to see their own philosophizing explained in those terms. I would suspect. I don't know. Do people get uncomfortable? Do philosophers get uncomfortable with this approach?
I mean, psychology is a slow-moving boat.
Yeah.
It's like I think it was some politician used the metaphor of, changing the government is like steering a cruise ship. And so if psychology is a cruise ship, philosophy is, I don't know, a continent or something. I think it's a lot more slow going. I do think, number one, I've only had a little bit of interaction with professional philosophers, like with this free will project. I talked to Christian List. He's been very positive. But so that's the short answer is because I'm not one of them, there hasn't been too much reaction. But my reading of philosophy is this is sort of the logical consequence of what philosophy's already been doing. So at least since sounds like really
Hume,
pretentious. Well, I would say like
even
Wittgenstein,
before.
or even
Wittgen-
yeah, like even Kant. Immanuel Kant, I think, was an evolutionary psychologist. If you actually look at him, his point is, look, you can't. There's no perspective independence in philosophy, and
Hmm.
you can't understand what philosophy is unless you understand sort of the psychology that we're bringing to bear. I mean, that's sort of his
Yeah.
point in different. And so I do
Yeah.
think that this is an inevitable part of adaptationism solidifying itself into human inquiry is that there will be the additional part of adaptationism entering into philosophy and and yeah. Whether or not
It's
the individual,
inevitable.
yeah, whether or not the
We have
individual,
no choice
yeah,
but to succumb to
exactly. So
adaptationist analysis.
whether or not the individual philosophers themselves would agree or disagree, just because they're humans and they've committed to their own status games in your language.
Yeah.
I think that you can see a line of psychology generally becoming integrated into philosophy, at least in the sense of like Kant and these other folks thinking we are using our own minds to do this enterprise.
Mhm.
And so I don't think that it's contrary to philosophy or even revolutionary. I think the philosophers got there
Yeah.
first of being like,
Yeah.
this whole philosophy thing is sort of BS to the extent that we're actually just using our psychology to do it, and adaptationism is just the next um, part of pushing on that.
Yeah. It's the next step of using psychological analysis to yield philosophical insight.
Right.
And I want to actually bolster your point that this is a topic that should be of interest to evolutionary psychologists. And this occurred to me when I was looking at Donald Brown's list of human universals. So we
Mm.
talked about this on our very first episode, I believe, or maybe it was our second episode. How this was inspiring for both of us, seeing a list of things that this anthropologist Donald Brown cataloged as being universal across human cultures, or at least across the ethnographic record that he looked at in his book Human Universals. And so I happened to be looking at this list for a different project. And while I was looking at it, a few items jumped out at me, and I had the thought, oh, Dave should know about this. This is
Mm.
relevant to what Dave's working on. And I started looking through it, and I found all these things
Yeah.
that make a pretty good case that the conceptual machinery underlying free will may well be a part of human nature, may be a part of the human cognitive phenotype. So here
Yeah.
are all the things that I
Oh,
found
awesome.
in
Cool.
Don Brown's list that are relevant to the free will debate.
You did your
So
homework. You did your
I did my
homework.
homework.
Yeah.
The first one is intention. The concept of intention or intending to do something is universal across cultures, at least according to Donald Brown. Choice making or choosing alternatives, universal. Decision making. This one's really interesting. Actions under self-control distinguished from those not under
Yeah.
control.
Yeah.
That I
Yeah.
find incredibly
Yeah.
fascinating
Yeah.
that that distinction is made
Yeah.
in so many cultures.
Yeah.
Culture/nature distinction.
Mm.
The distinction between something caused by culture or nature, discrepancies between speech, thought, and action.
Mm.
So doing something that is contrary to one's words or thoughts.
Mm.
Self-distinguished from other. That one's pretty obvious,
Mm.
but it's, I think,
Yeah.
relevant. Sanctions for crimes against the collectivity and redress of wrongs. So
Yeah.
this is suggestive that there's some notion of deserts in the way we hold people responsible and punish them. Self as neither wholly passive nor wholly autonomous.
Mm.
Self as subject and object. And this one I find incredibly fascinating. Self is responsible.
Mm. Yeah.
So all those things I think are
Yeah.
part and parcel of the discourse on free will.
Yeah.
And I think this at least we have a very strong prima facie case that the way we think about and talk about free will is rooted in fundamental aspects of the human cognitive phenotype, or at least the conceptual machinery that we bring to bear. This is a pretty good candidate for being a part of human nature. So I think you're hitting on something that ought to be of interest to evolutionary social scientists.
Yeah. I love that. And there's been a few people who I've talked to who are very dyed-in-the-wool adaptationists who are sort of like, why are you doing free will at all? And in some
Mhm.
sense, I say to them, just snip out free will and just say, look,
Yeah.
there's a class of adaptations that are really important that you've just covered really nicely, that there hasn't been enough conceptual work, task analyses of empirical inquiry into that are really fundamental, straightforward things that you would expect to be in an organism like us. So yes, that um, I would argue there's a large swath of the evolved phenotype that hasn't been looked at really, and free will is a way into it.
So free will has been a point of contention for millennia. Um, you think, correct me if I'm wrong, you have a solution to this age-old quandary,
Yeah,
or at least some kind of solution, and
yeah,
it is rooted in
I
the
think we
idea.
have
All right,
a I think we have a new idea that moves our understanding of it forward. And I do think there is a solution to it, but it's sort of the Douglas Adams, what is the Douglas Adams book? Um, Maybe it's Hitchhiker's Guide or Life, the Universe, something like that. But then they in one of the so this is science fiction Douglas Adams, where do you know Douglas Adams, David?
yes, I'm a fan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they make this giant supercomputer and it
Hmm.
calculates the answer to life, the universe, and everything, and it spits out the answer. Do you remember what the answer is?
Yes, 42.
42, right? Exactly. Yeah. And it
Wonderful, wonderful moment.
yeah, exactly. And in this, the answer to the problem of free will is sort of like that. But we do think there's an answer, and I do think there's a way to sort of look past it. And yeah, so I think we have something new to say about it. Yeah.
And it's 42.
And it's
That's
close
the
to
solution.
42. Yeah.
Maybe 43,
Yeah. No,
45.
it's
Okay.
words. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I remember in briefly discussing this with me before we started recording, you mentioned that the idea of mismatch was at the
Mm,
root of your quote unquote solution to the problem of free will. So what is mismatch doing here? What role
yeah,
is it playing
yeah.
in your
So this is
approach?
so there's been two parts to this. So since this has been something people have been working on for a really long time, it took some time to do. So there were two parts to this. The first part was an adaptationist approach to the adaptations that are underlying what people are talking about when they talk about free will. And I have
Hmm.
and so this is basically a psychological explanation of what people are talking about,
Hmm.
and then a psychological explanation of why there's been a debate about why science is maybe threatening the existence of free will for some people and not for other people. So it
Hmm.
was the psychology of what are people talking about when they talk about free will, and then what's the psychology of the people who are debating the one side or the other, saying there is or isn't free will, or saying that
Hmm.
science conflicts with free will or not. And then
Hmm.
that was sort of the main first part of the project, and that's the one that I've talked about, presented on. But we were talking before we started recording, what I realized was sort of implicit in that thing was the idea of evolutionary mismatch. And
Hmm.
I think the second part of evolutionary mismatch is sort of hitting the nail on the head. And I didn't realize it at first. And it's taken me some time to sort of come around to the big picture idea where you get close to the language of sort of solving the problem of free will. And I think it's with this idea of sort of evolutionary mismatch combined with the other stuff of what's the underlying psychology.
So for those who are unfamiliar, evolutionary mismatch is when the adaptations of an organism is mismatched with the current environment in which the organism finds itself.
Yeah.
So because humans evolved in a very different environment than the one we now inhabit because of rapid technological and cultural change, many of our adaptations have failed to catch up to the current environment. The examples that are usually given are, our craving for junk food and fast food that, gives us heart disease. We talked about this, how it's a bit simplistic
Mm,
in our conversation with Daniel Nettle, but that's an example that people bring up. Another example is birth control and contraception. I remember Steven Pinker in his book How the Mind Works said that maybe give us another 1,000 generations and we'll evolve to fear contraception the same way we fear snakes and heights
right.
and predators.
Right. But to our credit, I think even the Karen Kramer episode and the Brooke Shelza also sort of made added sophistication to that. That some of the decision
Yeah,
making is about investment in the social world, competition of your offspring, such that humans are not just maximizing their offspring numbers. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah. And so, in some ways, I think the idea of evolutionary mismatch has been a bit oversold, a bit overstated in evolutionary psychology. It's continuing to be revised by new insights into the variability of human ancestral environments. Manveer Singh has done some work on this, that the idea of the small scale egalitarian hunter-gatherer society is something of a myth, that there is actually widespread variation in terms of the degree of size of hunter-gatherer groups, their hierarchical nature, their centralization. And so I'm continuing to be of the opinion that mismatch has been a bit overrated in
Mm.
evolutionary psychology. But convince me that I'm wrong in the
Yeah,
case
yeah. Well, I'll
of
say
free
I'll
will.
say a really short one, which is also sodium vapor lights from Roger Shepard is a very good example. So
Hmm.
these are lights that, are different than terrestrial sun illumination
Hmm.
in your car under a sodium vapor light. They become less prevalent because LEDs now. But your car would look, purple, but it was red, and it's just because your visual system just sort of makes assumptions about the
Hmm.
the the way the light works, right? It's just a
Hmm.
mismatch. So anyway. Um, so this is all right. In order to explain the mismatch part, I think it will be helpful to talk first about what people are worrying about or talking about when they're talking about free will.
Hmm. What are we worrying about?
Yeah. So
What is really at stake here?
yeah. So if you look back, So, so sit down, pull up a chair, kids. So this guy Epicurus, right, from like a long time ago. But
Mm.
basically, what happened was people started doing science and philosophy, and they started realizing, okay, look, sort of the world is understandable and knowable, and the way that we work ultimately is sort of predictable, maybe mechanical, whether or not it's sort of probabilistic or deterministic, that's sort of, we can have that. We can talk about that later. But basically, as people started talking about the scientific and conceptual analysis of like philosophy, people started to realize, well, maybe the way that we work is knowable. And then as soon as people started realizing that that might be true, then they realized, well, that might mean we don't have freedom to choose things. So, in other words, I walk around making decisions and I'm free to like do whatever I want to do. So, like right now, I could like close my computer and get up and go get a cup of coffee if I wanted to, like that's something I could do. And so, and when I can't do something, like if I got trapped in this office, it would be pretty distressing. Like I care about
Yeah.
having my freedom, and my freedom is
Hmm.
real, and
Yeah.
that's a really important thing. And so we all walk around feeling like I can make decisions, I can do what I want to do, and then comes along this idea, well, actually, the way that you work is with a bunch of different little systems. And even in early days, before they even knew what the systems were, the philosophers sort of decided, in principle, somebody someday is going to figure out all the little mechanical doohickeys that make us up. And
Hmm.
what they realized, and I think anybody who's sort of thinking clearly arrives at this conclusion, is that those little doohickeys don't have free will, right?
Mm.
So if you look inside any part of my body, there's nothing that corresponds to sort of freedom or decision or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Your
And
liver is
so,
not making
yeah,
decisions.
that's right. Yeah.
Your lungs don't have free will.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your pancreas. Yeah. These are
Yeah.
just mechanical systems that
That's
are,
right.
with
That's right.
inputs and outputs. And the
Yeah.
brain, in theory, should be no different.
Yeah. So unlike me, so for me, like I can look around, there's a bunch of inputs to me, but I ultimately at some point I make a decision, you know.
Hmm.
But there's nothing like that. If you reduce me or cut me open or break me up conceptually or
Mm.
literally, you don't find
Yeah.
anything like that. And this fundamentally is the problem of free will. It's just that,
Yeah.
is free will real, given that either in principle or in practice, if you look into how we work, we don't see anything like freedom at the level of how we actually work. And
Mm.
so then people were saying, well, look, if you if we don't find freedom down here, then maybe there's no such thing as free will. And pretty
Mm.
early on, it actually ended up being that some people really felt like that was true. And then other people were sort of like, well, that's okay, but we still have freedom. And this
Mm.
sort of became, to gloss over a lot, this became the free will debate, which is that,
Yeah.
and the free will debate's complicated because,
So
yeah,
I
yeah,
want to
yeah,
make sure that
yeah,
we
yeah,
get the three positions
yeah,
that you've just
yeah,
sketched
sure.
so there are three camps. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
One is that we have no free will. This is determinism. We live in a clockwork universe with cause and effect where you can perfectly predict everything that's going to happen. If you have perfect knowledge of each state of the universe, you can predict the
Hmm.
next state. That's determinism. Free will is an illusion.
Yeah,
F you.
yeah,
And the second camp is yes, we do have free will. F you. Even though there's clockwork stuff in the universe,
yes.
we are different. We have souls, we have a consciousness, we have freedom, and we transcend all that stuff. That's the second position. The third position is sort of somewhere in the middle, where it's like, yes, we're part of a clockwork cause effect universe, and yeah, in theory, you could break me down into all my components, but that stuff is still compatible with me choosing and me having free will. So that is the compatibilist camp, where yes, things are deterministic, but we still have freedom, and freedom is compatible with determinism.
Yeah, yes. This is why I was gonna. Yeah, exactly. And it's
Okay.
complicated. So I think for me, at least, one way to clarify the sides in the debate are there are some people who are incompatibilists who think that
Hmm.
understanding the world, the mechanical world, quote unquote, a deterministic world. We'll just glump all these
Yeah.
together. Well, we can always do
It's
that.
worth noting that even some people even think that an indeterministic world is also incompatible
Yeah,
with
yeah,
free
yeah,
will.
yeah.
Like if stuff was
Exactly. Yeah,
random, like
yeah,
just like
exactly.
quantum
Yeah.
fluctuations or
Yep.
whatever,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that's not really compatible with free will either. If I'm
Yeah,
just
exactly.
behaving randomly as a result of like
Exactly.
random quantum fluctuations, that doesn't make me any more free, right?
Yeah. So
Anyway,
so
yeah.
there's income so people who are who think that there's a conflict, we'll just call it
Hmm.
between like a mechanical view of the world and free
Hmm.
will.
Yep.
That's a whole category of people, and you can
Yeah.
actually end up on two different places with that.
Right.
So you accept
Yeah.
the premise that they're incompatible,
Hmm.
but then you can say, well, I don't think there's free will. And you go
Hmm.
with the world as mechanical, right?
Right.
And those are sometimes called like it's called will illusionism, where it's just
Hmm. Right.
you say it's an illusion. And this would be like Sam Harris or
Right.
why can't I think of his name? The zebras don't get Robert Sapolsky. Yeah.
That's
Robert
right. Yeah, he
Sapolsky.
has a
So
book
these
on
are
this.
people who
Yeah.
say, look, you guys who are not we're hard-nosed scientists and
Hmm.
F you to everyone who's wishfully thinking out there that free
Yeah.
will exists. Nope, it
Hmm.
doesn't. Grow up.
Yeah.
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 I don't agree with those people.
Yeah.
I
Odding
would
up,
account.
as the Aussies would say.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So those are illusionists, and
Yeah.
they accept that the conflict, right? The premise that
Okay.
there's a conflict. There's other people who believe in free will. They're called libertarians. It has nothing to do with the political party, but it's that
Hmm.
they believe that, yeah, a mechanical view of the world is incompatible with free will, but they believe free will exists. And so
Hmm.
they sort of believe, like, kind of, I mean, if you really push on it, it's like sort of almost spiritualist, where it's sort of
Yeah.
there's some invisible essence that is transcendent over
Hmm.
the gooey meat stuff, right?
Yeah.
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 So those are two different results of the same accepted premise that the
Yes.
meat and the freedom are incompatible.
Yes. That's a really interesting point. That in some sense, their disagreement stems from a deeper agreement.
Yeah,
That they
totally.
both are seeing the world the same way. That there is this fundamental conflict,
Yeah,
and they just resolve that conflict in different ways.
completely. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Cool. Yeah.
And as you put it, then there's sort of a third category, which is compatibilists, which who
Yeah.
reject that meat and freedom are not compatible, or I don't
Hmm.
know too many negatives, but basically they say that look, meat and freedom are compatible, and
Yeah.
that everything, like going to the store, listening to music, seeing things, this is all made possible by meat. So why
Hmm.
wouldn't my freedom be any different? Right?
Hmm.
The ability to
Well,
choose is just made possible. I mean, and so this is somebody like Dan Dennett,
right.
or Dina Roski's, or like me. I mean, I am a compatibilist. Although
Hmm.
again, upon in doing this project, I also realized in some sense what we're saying in this project about the upcycle of free will argues that the compatibilists aren't entirely right either, and that the incompatibilists do have a point. So I sort of even
Hmm.
transcended my own, but like coming into this, and still to this day, if you had to put me in one of these
Hmm.
categories, I would be a compatibilist. Yeah.
Hmm. Cool. It's interesting. I used to be an incompatibilist. I used to
Mm.
be in the Sam
Yeah.
Harris camp. And I think for bad reasons, it was more for vibes-based reasons. Like I liked the vibe of being like a
Yeah.
hard-headed,
Yeah. You're
scientific thinking
scientists, you're
person.
rationalists. Yeah, no, 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 totally.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trap. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And so I fell into that trap.
Yeah.
And I also liked the edginess of it. It was kind of cool. It was,
Yeah.
politically congenial too. Like, oh yeah, nobody pulls themselves up by their own bootstraps.
Yeah.
We're all just, deterministic things.
Yeah.
It was, fit with my like, views on the criminal justice system. That we should focus more on rehabilitation and not
Yeah.
just desserts. Like,
Yes.
it was
Yes.
all just, it was a total vibes-based,
Yeah.
decision that I regret in hindsight. But I remember at some point I was just persuaded. I was listening to a debate with Dan Dennett and some other philosopher. I think it was Greg
Yeah,
Caruso.
Greg Crusoe. Yeah, because Greg Crusoe is exactly well, I don't want to paint him too hard, but he is very much in what you just said, which is he's arguing that a really strong or retributive,
Yeah.
punishing view of criminal justice is sort of foolish in light of what we
Yes.
know. Yeah.
Yes. And I remember listening to a debate, or maybe I was reading a debate. I
Yeah.
can't remember. It was a debate between Dan Dennett and him.
Yeah, they have a
It was
book
weird. I
called
had,
Just Desserts is the book of their debate
ah,
back and
yes.
forth. Yeah.
Maybe I was reading that book.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I was reading the book, and while I was reading it, I was convinced by Greg Caruso. I'm like, oh, Greg's
Yeah.
right.
It's a great, yeah,
And
he
then
has great
like
points. Yeah.
but like gradually as I continued to reflect on it after I had read it, like weeks after,
Yeah.
I ended up thinking, wait a second, no, he's actually wrong. Dan Dennett is right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just
Mm.
like it was this
Yeah.
kind of sleeper effect
Yeah. Yeah.
where like something about Dan Dennett's points just kind of sunk in with me, and then I realized no, he's actually right.
Yeah.
That and I remember it was something about I was just thinking about like what did they actually disagree about?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like both sides agree that we should have punishment and we should hold people accountable for crimes and we should have a criminal justice system. So like what is actually
Yeah.
at stake here?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
realized that
Yeah.
there's nothing at stake.
Yeah.
They both have the same opinions about
Yeah.
criminal justice policy. They're both liberal
Yeah.
progressives. Like they both, when the rubber meets the road, like they're both going to behave in the world in the same way. So what are they really arguing about? When
Yeah.
I realized that, of course it's compatible.
Yeah.
Like when Greg is talking about, retributivism doesn't make sense. Well, it's just we can reframe retributivism in the terms of determinism, where what punishment is holding an incentive sensitive being
Yeah.
accountable.
Yeah.
When Sam Harris says, "Of course we should hold people responsible for what they do," well, that's what the whole debate is,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
can't just say that. Well, of
Yeah.
course we should hold people responsible
Yeah.
because then there's no debate.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I ended up realizing that there's a way to reconcile our language with,
Yeah.
hard-headed facts about us as incentive sensitive beings,
Yeah.
being sensitive to our incentives, and distinguishing between us when we're sensitive to our incentives and rewards and punishments, and us when we're not sensitive to rewards and punishments. And obviously, it makes more sense to reward us and punish us when we're sensitive to rewards and punishments, that is, when we're freely choosing. And it makes no sense to reward and punish us when we're not sensitive to rewards and punishments. And
Yeah.
that just dissolves the whole debate, I think.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. And there's no incompatibility there. So it eventually dawned on me and I changed my mind and I became a compatibilist.
Yeah,
But anyway,
but no, that's great. And I like what you said there too. It's sort of a rabbit duck illusion. And if you've never, the
yeah.
listeners haven't looked at the rabbit duck illusion, go take a look at it. And it flips back and forth between a rabbit and duck. And I think free will is like that, where I think all of us at some point, when you start thinking about the Caruso point or the incompatibilist point, some part of us is sort of like, yeah, I get that. That makes sense. Like
Yeah.
if you think
Yeah.
if you hear it, you're like, yeah, no, like I'm mechanical. It doesn't make sense. How could I be free? Right? Like
Yeah.
that's real. And like I think everybody feels that. But then you can also think, well, but yeah, but everything I do is made possible by mechanical stuff. So it must not be incompatible. It must be compatible, right? And I think that ability to see both ways and it is part of the paradox of free
Yeah.
will. And I think some people lean more strongly towards one side versus the other. There's starting to be empirical work on this where people ask people, do you think that a mechanical view of the world is compatible with free will? What do you think? And actually, like if you experimental philosophers, when they ask people, most people are pretty compatibilist, which sort of surprised philosophers. And a lot of philosophers sort of think, well, people don't understand what we mean by free will. And if they actually understood what we meant by free will, they wouldn't be compatibilist. And there's, if you change circumstances, so like if people do something morally wrong, they'll say the person had more free will than not. So like it's colored
Hmm.
by moral evaluation and things like that. But anyway, I don't
Hmm.
want to get too far into that. But basically, yeah, what you just described of you can sort of see it both ways, but you land on one side. I think that's a
Yeah.
very common thing. And that's part of the explanation. We will explain why that sort of you can see it both ways sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I do
Hmm.
think this account, which we're gonna like stop in 10 minutes and we're just gonna tease people for the solution, but not really as a joke. But I think even the Caruso Dennett thing, I think this account explains what they're arguing about, actually. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the meat of it.
Yeah.
What are they arguing about? What is the account? What are you
Yeah,
proposing?
sure. Okay, so let's start with a concrete example. Okay. So and I sort of alluded to it already, but like there's just certain things that like I can do as an agent, and then there's just
Hmm.
certain things I can't, right? So like a good example, I like using this example is that if I wanted to, I could start waking up earlier than I do currently, right?
Hmm.
Like I could just like set my alarm earlier and I could start waking up earlier.
Hmm.
Let's suppose that I broke a bone. Um,
Okay.
Now let's assume I'm already doing everything I possibly can in terms of like allowing it to heal.
Hmm.
What I can't do, unlike the wake up early thing, is just sort of convince myself to heal my broken bone, right? Like it's not in my purview or ken or whatever verb you want to use to actually like heal my broken bone. Like I can't do that. It's just going to be
Hmm.
time, right? I can't convince myself to do it. You can't convince me. You could hold a gun to my head. It's not going to affect the healing of my broken bone. Unlike the waking up earlier in the morning, right? So
Hmm.
I can choose to wake up earlier in the morning. If you held a gun to my head, I could wake up earlier in the morning. You wouldn't even have to do
Yeah.
that. So that is a meaningful difference. That's an intuitive difference,
Hmm.
but that's a meaningful difference.
Yeah, and certainly I would add a very adaptively relevant difference that the mind should have evolved to make. It would be disastrous if you got that question wrong. If I tried to like cajole you into healing more quickly
Yes,
and punish you if you didn't heal fast enough, like that would be it would destroy our
correct.
relationship. It would be absolutely disastrous for me.
Correct.
On the other hand, if I thought that you couldn't control how early you woke up when you actually could, and I could incentivize you with rewards and punishment to change your behavior, and I missed that out, that would also be disastrous. So there are
Correct.
huge costs to getting this distinction wrong. This is of huge adaptive significance of detecting this difference, to use your terminology.
That's right. And that's exactly right. It's sort of the more subtle version of it would be a disaster for an organism that couldn't fly to think it could, right?
Yes.
Or
Hmm.
it just like part of organism design should be like, what can I do? What are
Yeah.
the things, what are the outcomes that I can affect in the world?
Hmm.
And whether it's within my body envelope or can I convince you to do, that's a
Hmm.
strong selection pressure. And if I get that wrong, that's a big cost,
Hmm.
right? Yeah. So I think that's like at a deep level, that's what this is all about. So
Yeah.
let's take the example of waking up in the broken bone and let's unpack it a little more carefully.
Hmm.
Okay, and be
Yeah.
adaptationist about it. So we started at a very sort of folk psychological, like I can convince myself, right?
Hmm.
Let's make it a little more mechanisms described at more of a functional software level. Okay.
Hmm.
So here's what, and this is also work I'm doing with my graduate student, Michael Oswald. Here's how we're thinking about it. So the intuitive idea with the waking up in the morning, the idea that I can convince myself to do this. What that means is that there is one of the systems inside of us is sort of representing, it's almost like a meta representation. It's sort of
Hmm.
representing what outcomes in the world vary depending upon settings inside the organism. Okay, I'll unpack that a little bit. So just concretely, if so I have planning and motivational systems inside of me.
Hmm.
The state of those planning and motivational systems, if they're in different states, will change whether or not I wake up early or not, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
if the planning and motivational systems are in one setting, I will get up at 4 a.m. If they're in
Yeah.
another setting, I'll get up at 8 a.m.
Hmm.
So what time I wake up in the morning depends on the state of systems within me. There's
Or,
another,
more
yeah,
specifically in your brain. So with the
correct,
bone, like that
correct.
also depends
Exactly.
on
No, no, no,
your
that's a
your energy.
really good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So I don't know. I still haven't thought through all of this, but the roughest way I can think about it is that there is a system that is representing can the planning and motivation systems within this
Hmm.
body envelope
Hmm.
what outcomes can they affect, or
Hmm.
which outcomes are affected by them. And
Okay.
so that system would say, yes, waking up early in the morning is affected by those systems,
Right.
the state of those systems. Healing the broken bone, no. It doesn't matter if the state of those systems are, we really want to put it in like folk psychological terms, we really want to heal this broken bone. The bone's not going to be any different,
Right.
right?
And so, yeah, okay, so we can make it even more specific. So it's not so much that the decision depends on something inside you or that it depends on something inside your brain, it's that it depends on something, it depends on a very specific part of your brain,
Yes, correct.
and in particular, the planning and motivational systems.
Yeah, it might even,
It,
and I don't know if that's exactly right, but
yeah.
this is better than what the theory, this is a theory where there hasn't even been a theory. And
Hmm.
as I will explain, or maybe, I don't know, or in a paper if we don't get to it, I don't know if that's exactly right, but I think this is roughly right. Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. It's almost like if I think you're free to do something, I see a lever sticking out of your head that's connected to your planning and motivational systems
Yeah.
that I can pull.
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
and if you're not free, then there's no lever that I can pull.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, just to go concrete, like another example of this would be something like, why do we think addiction or habit, right? So, like
Hmm.
free will, people have, I mean, I don't know, people have this point, have these intuitions about different situations involve more or less free will.
Yeah.
And there's almost no theory of it. Like, this is one of the
Hmm.
weird things about the debate, as much as like
Yeah.
theorists do the debate, they often just invoke context that they appeal to intuition, but there's no theory of why that's an intuitive idea or why this situation
Yeah.
has more or less free will. This is
Hmm.
such a theory. So, for example,
Hmm.
one idea is that the maximum amount of free will, and I'm not going to cite everybody who says all this. This just know that like this is stuff other people have said. I'm just not going to like include citations because this is a podcast. So
Hmm.
but anyway, so like an idea would be like if you're facing a decision where you're really roughly indifferent about the choices, that's really a
Hmm.
free will situation, right?
Hmm.
And the idea is that, well, why would people have that intuition? Well, it's because it's completely dependent on the settings of like the planning system, right? Because there's, well, let's contrast that to the situation where you're addicted to nicotine, right?
Hmm.
So the situation where you're addicted to nicotine, or worse, like I don't know, uh, what did Kurt Cobain do? It wasn't
Like,
cocaine. It was
oh, heroin or something?
heroin.
I don't
Yeah. So
remember.
let's say you're
Yeah.
addicted to heroin, right?
Yeah.
Um, uh, the planning and motivation system, whatever those states are, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because there's some other system in your head that is overriding the planning and the planning or the goal planning and goal-based systems actually I think is probably more. So I have a goal of like not taking my heroin, but there's
Yeah.
another system that's just taking over, right?
So it's planning and means and reasoning.
Yeah,
So how
planning, maybe that's a better way to
what
put it.
yeah,
Yeah.
what means can I use to achieve this
Yeah,
end?
exactly.
And that system of, how can I achieve this goal? What states of the world are going to affect this goal? That system is disconnected from the thing you're interested in. It's disconnected from the heroin behavior. It's disconnected from the
Exactly.
bone healing or whatever.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah, yeah.
that's the claim that we're not free to choose it.
Exactly. And
Okay.
so that's why there's the intuition that the means end system is fully operational in
Hmm.
where I go to lunch today. Or
Hmm.
if I have two indifferent choices in an experimental game and I'm like, well, yellow versus blue, I don't know, I'll choose blue. Like that's just means end or the choosing system, right? The system that just sort of it's fully operative. Whereas for the
I
heroin,
want I want to push back a bit. I don't think that indifference really matters.
I don't
So
either,
I
but yeah, but
so I,
go
I
ahead. Yeah.
I have the intuition that even if I'm not indifferent, let's say I'm considering whether or not to rob a bank. Like
Yeah.
let's say I'm low on cash and
Mhm.
I really need the money, and the thought occurs, oh, I could just rob this cash register
Is
or
is this
whatever.
is this hypothetical, David?
Yeah, this is an
Okay.
autobiography actually.
Okay.
Um, uh,
We can
uh,
edit this out later.
So so I happen to be, let's say I happen to be carrying a gun with me, and I see, there's a cash register, there's lots of cash in it.
Yeah,
I think, I could just rob this cash register. And I think to myself, no, that would be terrible. That would make
yeah,
me a bad person.
yeah,
Things could go terribly awry. There are better ways to make money than stealing it. Bad David, don't do that. And
yep,
let's say I'm not indifferent at all. Like, I
yeah,
really have a clear
yeah, yeah,
moral
yeah,
revulsion at the thought, and I instantly reject it.
yeah,
And I think that's a really bad decision,
hmm,
and I continue living an upstanding life.
yeah,
Even if I'm not indifferent at all, and this decision is clear that I should not
yeah,
rob the person, I still have the intuition that that was a free choice.
yeah.
That I freely made that decision. So it's not, so even if I was indifferent, I was like torn between one thing or
Yeah,
the
yeah,
other, it doesn't seem like I would be, that makes me more free.
yeah.
I don't think it's the indifference itself. I think it's the mere fact that you have the options available,
Yeah.
not how much you weight either option.
I actually agree with that. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that people have made the argument that it's even indifference is sort of the maximum thing, but I agree
Mhm.
you don't really need that. And I
No.
and just to make this concrete, so yeah, just to review though, that's the argument is that it's the
Yep.
means end or goal-based system. And again, I don't
Hmm.
really know how to roughly characterize this. It's not,
Hmm.
but yeah,
Okay.
that's the idea is why do we have the intuition that the heroin addict is less free than you not choosing to rob the bank? Or if you don't like the heroin example, if you're really just in a habit, like let's say you mean to tie your shoes in a new way, but you're in just such of a habit that you tie them the old way, but you meant to tie them the new way, right?
Hmm.
You would be less like um, you kind of didn't do it on purpose, but you did it anyway. It was
Yeah.
sort of automatic,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yes.
that would be less free will, like in that
Yes.
context. Like it's just sort of you were on auto drive, quote unquote, you were on autopilot, like you were
Yeah.
just sort of it was an
Hmm.
automatic thing. Um,
Right.
that's less free will. And again, it's because there's this theory of what it is, what free will is this representation of sort of what's within this the purview of this planning or means ends system or
Hmm.
set of systems.
Right.
And
It's
and
sort of the rewardability and punishability. Like, if you tied your shoes, just out of habit, and you can't really control it, then no matter what I promise to reward you with or punish you with,
yeah,
if you do or don't tie your shoes, it's not going to change you, or it's going to
exactly.
have little effect on you because you're just so ingrained to be doing this. And so
Exactly.
for me, it tells me this is the type of thing that I can reward or punish
Yes.
and change, and
Yeah.
this is the type of thing that I shouldn't bother trying
Yes.
to reward or punish.
Exactly. And that
Yeah.
we have a term for that. It might be a bad term, but we call it the efficacy of intentional intervention, where sort
Okay.
of it's the idea that and again the precise thing is what we've already said, but the kind of intuitive idea is that you're treating the person intentionally, like you're just
Hmm.
giving them, you're convinced. If I want to change your behavior, David, I'm treating you like a person, saying,
Hmm.
look, I want to convince you, I want to incentivize you or disincentivize, like convince you, give you reasons why you should or shouldn't do
Yeah.
something.
Hmm.
If that's effective,
Yeah.
then you have free will. But if it's not, then you don't. So I
Got
might
it.
be able to convince you to choose red over green, but maybe not to not take heroin. And
Yeah.
and that's the difference between free will and not. So basically what free will is the efficacy of intentional intervention for third parties. So it's that
Hmm. Yes.
the I can convince you, um, but more importantly and primarily, it's also first person. It's this,
Hmm.
can I convince myself? Can I force myself to do something? Can I convince myself to not take heroin? Right. And if
Hmm.
the answer is no, like no matter what my planning or means ends reasoning delivers, I'm still taking heroin, then that means I
Hmm.
don't have free will. There's sort of no way I can convince myself even.
And so that confuses me. So what
Yeah.
does it even mean to convince
Well, that
myself?
yes, and that's an
Yeah.
intentional language thing. And then I think it
Yeah.
goes back to then
Yeah.
we can make it a functional level claim where it's a representation of no matter the states of the means and planning
Uh,
or the goal-based system. So we can say, look, even if the goal-based system says stop taking heroin,
hmm.
and even if the means and planning is all we're going to stop taking heroin, and that doesn't work,
Got
and that
it.
system registers we're still taking heroin, then
Yeah.
then it's then That's it. So that's the
It's
functional level
that's interesting.
distinction.
It's
Yeah.
almost like counterfactual reasoning. For the self, for the first person, it's like can reasoning about the potential implications or
Correct.
consequences of this change my behavior?
Yep.
If so, I should think through all the
Yep.
different downstream consequences, and that's going to change my behavior. But
Exactly.
if entertaining all
Yep.
the downstream consequences is going to be useless,
Yep.
then it's just a waste of energy for me to
Yeah.
entertain those consequences because it's not going to do anything. It's not going to shape my
Exactly.
behavior. And so
Exactly.
that's a useful distinction to make at the first person level,
Yes.
where is it worth it for me to entertain all the
Yes.
implications and to consider all the effects of one decision versus another? Or should I just not even entertain them and just, do whatever I was going to do anyway?
That's
And
right.
that should save me a lot of time. Like if no matter what I think about or what my reasoning process is like, it's not going to change my decision one way or the other, then it's pointless for me to entertain all these different factors,
Yep.
right? And so it's useful for the individual as well to not waste time going, entertaining all these fanciful scenarios.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. I like that. So
Yeah. And
the
counterfactual.
third
Yeah. Yeah. Counterfactual
the
is really
third
important.
person
I just
level
want
is,
to, yeah.
yeah, go
Well,
ahead.
go ahead. And then I'll, yeah.
So like at the third person level, it's more about like what can I do to reward or punish this person? If the answer is nothing, then the person isn't free. At the first person level, it's what can I think about or what consequences or implications can I consider to change my behavior?
Yeah.
And if the answer is nothing, then I at the first person level don't have free will.
Yeah. And this is why,
Okay.
and again, there had been no theory about this, but
Mm,
in the literature, one of the definitions people landed on for free will is reasons responsiveness.
okay.
And that is a result. Like that's all people talk about. Like if a person has reasons for what they're doing and they're responsive to reasons, then they have free will. But if they're not, then they don't.
Yeah.
Right. So like, and I think a good example would be something like, let's say you have like strong political convictions, right? Now, from the third person perspective, like I might not be able to convince you that to change your political convictions, right? But you should be able to convince yourself at least of your political convictions, right? Like if the reasons why you support a political party, right,
Mm,
are such that you know what they are, and those reasons no longer hold, and you still can't help but support the political party, then the
mm,
political party has implanted a chip in your head, right? Like if you're like, the reason why I
right.
support this party is because I think it's good for my family, and then you learn information of like it's not good for my family, and if that's really the reason why you support them, then you should be able to like not support them anymore, right? Like if that's the correct
Right.
reason. This theory is an intentional level, but it's reasons responsiveness, which is that
Mm,
and so I think what we have just been describing earlier explains why reasons responsiveness was a definition of free will people came up with.
It's interesting that uh, being able to say switch political parties if I'm persuaded that the other policies are going to make the country better. It seems to me like that might be a good strategy for me personally, but it also makes me look like a bad ally. Like if I can capriciously change parties, at the slightest whiff of an argument that maybe my party is wrong, then I'm a bad ally. I'm a bad
Yeah.
political ally.
Yeah.
Whereas if nothing is going to get me to change to the other side, then I'm a really loyal ally. And so it's almost like you want to destroy your free will to signal that you're a good ally and you're never going to, in the same way that you might want to signal that for a romantic relationship. Like if there's no way that I could ever even possibly consider someone else other than you,
Yep.
then that makes me a really good, committed romantic partner,
Yeah.
right? And there are some cases where we might want to burn our bridges
Yeah.
and signal that we don't have free will,
Yeah.
to signal that we're going to be a good romantic partner, a good ally, whatever.
Yeah, no, I think certain religions sort of have that metaphor of like there's a thing in you that's like constant separate from, and it's either like the bad part of you or it's God or whatever. But this idea
Yeah.
sort of that, yeah, and you're getting into the other part of this, which is this is not a neutral thing.
Mm,
So what we've been talking about is ways to intervene upon the world. So it's ways to change my future behavior with respect to myself. So what is it that um, if the settings within my planning and reason based or whatever, however I want to talk about it, systems are in different states, then these are different outcomes that are all within my purview, right? And so, for example, like maybe I haven't gone through the systems haven't gone through their operations yet. So it would be reasonable for me to say, well, 10 minutes from now, I can do a number of different things because those systems haven't calculated what they're going to do 10 minutes from now. So it'd be very reasonable and meaningful for me to say that. It's also then what are the things I can do to convince you of to do, right? Can I change the
Mhm.
state of those systems? Is it something I can effectively intervene upon? It's getting back to the wake up in the morning versus the broken bone. An organism should not be value neutral with respect to this. And this is where compatibilism or incompatibilism and the problem of free will comes in the first place. So what you have is you have a bunch of people who are saying, look, up until we started doing philosophy, you had this idea that you were free to do certain things like wake up early in the morning. You already knew you weren't free to like heal your broken bone, but whatever.
Mhm.
But even the stuff you were free about, guess what? That stuff, if you look under the hood, is all mechanical. And for an organism that cares about not being manipulated
Mm.
by others, that's a problem. And I think the concern about manipulation is central to the problem of free will. And it's there everywhere in the literature, but it's not really talked about explicitly. And it's exactly what would fall out from what we've just talked about, which is, for example, if David, your decision making, your goals and outcomes, I could sort of poke on or predict ahead of time or influence directly without trying to convince you, that would be an enormous boon to me and it would be a horrible problem for you. So think about like a tell in poker,
Mm.
right? So
Yeah.
if every time you were about to make a decision, I could anticipate your decision ahead of time because I could see like you just always, I don't know, tugged your ear.
Mm.
Um, then and you don't know that that's true of you, and you feel like you're still making a decision, but I already know what you're going to do. I can use that to my
Mm.
strategic advantage. If I know how you make a decision, like the extreme version and philosophers rely on this. If I know how your brain makes a decision, then I can go into your brain and I can poke on the right place at the right time. You think you've made a decision, but guess what? I influenced your decision for you. I should
Mm.
that's something in the social strategery. Is that a word?
I
Strategery.
believe George W. Bush
Yeah,
coined that term.
exactly. And now it's like it's a joke word. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfectly cromulent for all the Simpsons listeners
Yeah.
or watchers. Uh, um, that strategic concern,
Mm.
even
Yeah.
at a very evolved prosaic level of like tells in poker, or
Yeah.
sort of like every time I don't know, like you could just think of a mundane example, like not neuroscience, right? But just like a prosaic example, like every time you get upset because you don't get when you hunt and you miss something, you get angry, and I can just predict that ahead or something like that. There's always strategic advantage to understanding or being able to manipulate somebody below the level of an intentional intervention, below the level of goals and means ends systems.
Mm.
So this should not be neutral. And the idea is that a large part of what like if an alien came and was like, what is this free will debate about? What is this concern? One one thing sort of baked in from the beginning is this concern that if we are mechanical, we don't have freedom. And what that means is that if there's a way to know how I'm free in a mechanical fashion, it means that somebody could poke on it or manipulate it. And that should be a concern for me.
Mm. Interesting. So is the fear that I'm going to outfox you, say in poker, like if I know what you're going to do, then I can exploit you in some way? Or is it the fear that if it's mechanical, then I can manipulate the mechanical aspects of it in some way? Because those seem different. Is it merely that the fear of being outfoxed, or is it the fear of someone, say an evil neuroscientist, changing the neurons in my brain to make me do something, or is it both?
I think it's both.
Okay,
Yeah, I think it's both. Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think the the point about the fear of being outfoxed or predicted, I think, is a really insightful one. We often like kind of take pride about being unpredictable or doing things that other people didn't anticipate being unique, not conforming or
Hmm.
mindlessly conforming. Like we almost kind of feel embarrassed if we behave in a way that's too
Yeah.
predictable.
Yeah.
Like, if all of my political views can be predicted in advance based on the Democratic Party's political platform, that's kind of embarrassing. It
Yeah.
means that like I don't think for myself. Like you can
Yeah.
just easily predict everything I'm going to say. Like all the talking points I'm going to go down. Like I'm kind of like embarrassed about that
Yeah.
sometimes,
Yeah.
and we're often kind of ashamed or embarrassed about being too predictable because it elicits this fear that we can be easily exploited or manipulated if people can just see through to the underlying mechanics of everything we do. And I think this fear is often elicited by evolutionary psychology itself.
Yeah.
Like when we start to get into the underlying mechanics of our decision making and start trying to actually predict how we're going to do or
Yeah.
predict what we're going to do or like which mates we're going to be attracted to in which stage of the menstrual cycle or which life stage or whatever we can based on like their facial symmetry or whatever we can predict all these things. That's kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It suggests that someone could manipulate us or exploit us. So do you think so? It's interesting. It almost explains why people are uncomfortable by evolutionary psychology.
Mm.
So, Steven Pinker in his book, The Blank Slate, goes through all the reasons why people are uncomfortable with this idea of an evolved human nature. And one of them is the fear of determinism. He has a whole
Yeah.
chapter on this. That if we understand all the mechanics, the nuts and bolts of, our brains and who we are as animals, that there's something uncomfy and scary about that.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying explains why we're so uncomfortable
Yeah.
about that. Do you buy that?
Yeah, yeah, and it actually, I mean, one of the things, and we might cut. I mean, so Michael Osfeld and I, we have a empirical project plan because we believe that there's this idea that people are incompatibilists or compatibilists about free will, and we actually think
Yeah.
that there's a more precise way to carve people up as individual differences, and it might even be
Mm,
stable. And we think that it's actually related to this issue of when do people have free will? And we almost use the metaphor of like when do they get off the station on like or when do they get off the train? And there's three
hmm
different stops. One is there's a group of people who the fact that the manipulatability, the knowledge itself, even in principle, exists means that there's no free will, right? So
Hmm.
so these would be people I suspect who are very vigilant about manipulation or
Yeah.
manipulatability. And so there's just certain people who I think like what it is there, I don't know, there's probably lots of ways to get to this individual difference, but there's some people who have the conviction that even if in principle people could be manipulated, even if we don't have the knowledge yet, even if we don't have the means, the fact that it's in principle possible means there's n- means we need to be worried about manipulation. So it's
Yeah.
some that is one that's so that gets you're getting off the free will train early. That's step one.
Yeah.
Step two is you get off the free will train not when it's just in principle possible, but when something specifically is known, right? So it
Hmm.
might be that like something about um, the so you do learn like people actually know something about this particular thing, or maybe there's even like technology available to manipulate that. And then some people like have this idea that then we don't have free will, at least for this particular thing. Um, those people, um, but I'm gonna skip that because there's another part to it, but it's gonna be too complicated. There's a third stop, which I think I am, and I suspect you are too, and I think most evolutionary psychologists are, which is the third stop, which is, and you stay on the free will train longest. And this is just because in principle something's knowable, it doesn't mean that you don't have free will. And even if we know a lot about the system and how it works, it doesn't mean we don't have free will. But if we know how the system works, and in this particular case, a bunch of neuroscientists actually intervened against somebody's knowledge or will in this case, then the question is, do they have free will? Well, no, right?
Yeah.
They were manipulated. So
Yeah.
so it's sort of like the three stops are sort of is manipulation in principle possible, in practice possible, or did it happen? And I
Hmm.
think most compatibilists get off at stop three. And
Mm,
it's because you say, look, free will is just compatible. So, like, you know how the system works,
yeah.
but unless you manipulate the system, you have free will. And
Yes.
so I think most compatibilism is an expression of getting off at step three. And that's actually like the evolved concern is that are you being manipulated, right?
Right.
Um,
And here, manipulation is a really precise definition. So if I threaten you with a punishment or entice you with the promise of a reward, that's not manipulation in your sense because I'm speaking directly to your means and reasoning planning systems, right? And if I change your behavior by offering those rewards or threatening those punishments and you change your behavior, you freely made that choice and you were affected by the incentives that I were giving you. But if I bypass that and I don't offer you anything, or if I don't threaten you with anything, and I just slip you a pill or sneak into your bedroom at night and give do some
yeah,
brain
yeah,
surgery on you,
yeah,
then I've manipulated you in the sense that is scarier because you're not getting anything out of it. I'm just contorting you to my desires, and you're not getting anything out of the deal. Whereas if I offer to pay you money and I give you the money, like we're mutually benefiting in that case. But if I'm just slipping you a pill without your knowledge, then you're not benefiting. It's purely in my interest. It's exploitation, in the sense that we discussed in our previous episode with Hannes. Do you buy that way of thinking?
I do. I think the system, you're exactly right. I think the system is smarter than that, though, in the
Okay.
following sense of if I hold a gun to your head,
Yeah.
that is still a cost benefit calculation. And I
Hmm.
think most people
Right.
would say like you don't have free will. And I think that's because ultimately this is still about interventionism. Like it's causal interventionism, which is just a jargony way of saying that all of these systems are for intervening upon the world and changing the world. So in the case of holding a gun to your head, what's the most effective intervention? It's not saying, David, you don't need to worry about your head. You don't need to care about your head. It would be to like remove
Right.
the gun, right? So
Yeah.
in that sense, that's why we think it's about the efficacy of intentional intervention. In that case, it's that the most effective intervention isn't um, uh, convincing you to not worry about the gun. It's to just remove the gun, right?
Right.
Um, but so it's a little bit more of a continuum. This sort of complicates this a little bit
Yeah.
in the sense of and I think this is why people have this intuition that the indifferent choice is the maximum free will, because to the extent that you feel compelled, like, oh man, I really have to get this birthday gift for my, or Christmas gift or Hanukkah gift or whatever for my kid. And it's because like the ambient culture has convinced my child that it's like a thing, like I'm not making that decision, but I feel compelled by the cost benefit structure of the world. It's not sort of up to me. And I think
Right.
like I'm not free to just choose whatever gift I would want for my kid. And I
Yeah.
think it does. I think it's still consistent with the underlying thing, which is like to the extent it is up to the means end system,
Yeah.
sort of I imbuing its own sort of costs and benefits, or like, I mean, this is where the mismatch
Yeah.
will get in that,
Okay.
but basically, to the extent that the valuation is internal or endogenous and not exogenous to
Yeah.
the planning and motivation or goal-based systems or the means end systems, I think it's more free will. So,
Okay.
yeah, so I think you're right, broadly speaking, but I think it's even more subtle, such that
Right.
the cost benefit thing, like if somebody was holding your family hostage
Yeah.
and that made you rob a bank, you would have less free will than a
Yes.
situation in which you just decided it was be in your interest to rob the bank, right?
Hmm.
But it's still a cost
That's
benefit
interesting.
calculation on your part.
Right. Maybe the way to think about it is that there are some situations that are so extreme in their
Mhm.
valuation that they
Yeah,
bypass the means and reasoning
yeah,
system altogether. Like if your
exactly.
survival is at stake,
Yeah,
then your fight or flight system kicks in.
yeah,
You're just going to do whatever you need to get out of that
yeah,
situation and survive.
yeah,
And means end reasoning, except for the narrow goal of surviving,
yeah,
is just going to be irrelevant.
yeah.
And so it's sort of analogous to slipping you a pill, because thinking about the implications of getting your head blown off is just not going to shape your behavior in any way,
That's
right?
right.
It's just a non-negotiable thing. Like you have no choice but to get out of that situation,
Yeah,
right?
and this is also why, I mean, one of the reasons why I think the free will debate has been so difficult is that if you start to unpack it, there are some strong, straightforward answers, and we can get to them about is free will real or what is it? But
Yeah,
one part of the questions that have all been lumped together is a value judgment. Like it's a value judgment, so there's no fact in the matter, which is what's the efficacy of intentional interventions, or should you care? So, for example,
yeah,
let's say somebody's holding a gun to your head, right?
yeah,
Maybe what they're asking you to do is so terrible that you shouldn't care about your head. And if
yeah.
somebody has that evaluation, then they would
Right.
argue you do have free will, right?
Yes.
Because they're
Yes.
actually saying, no, this is a situation where actually it should be up to David's means and valuation systems to choose a different outcome. And
Yeah.
so there's actually no fact of the matter about whether or not it's because there's strategic reasons why people
Hmm.
might say or argue like, this you it should be up to the state of your planning and goal-based systems, and other people would say it's not. And so this is especially why one of the findings in the literature is that when you detect somebody has imposed a cost, like they've robbed a bank, they've done something morally bad,
Yeah.
automatically there's sort of more free will.
Yeah.
And the idea is that that would be what you would expect from like an error management perspective, from the sense of, David, if you've done something wrong to the community or to me, I want to make sure that it's not a result of your planning means and systems. So I'm going to err on the side of attributing it to those to make sure that it's not. If you tell
Yeah.
me something like, well, somebody was holding a gun to my head, then I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And let's get the guy who was holding the gun to your head, right?
Right.
But but that's the general idea, and this explains why that there's if you just hold everything constant, when there's a negative, morally bad outcome, people ascribe more free will to that outcome. This explains why that would be, because there's a bias in the evolved system to sort of target whether or not this was originating out of the thing in the organism that I can change in principle.
Hmm. Yeah. I want to get your thought on an idea that occurred to me a few minutes ago on a possible direction you could take this line of work. So there are certain strategic situations where being predicted or outfoxed by your opponent is going to be really bad for you.
Yeah.
So if you're playing rock, paper, scissors,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really bad for me if you can anticipate what move I'm going to make,
Yeah.
right? Because then you can take advantage of that and
Hmm.
win the game, right? But if we're playing a coordination game, let's say we're communicating, and it really benefits you to predict in advance, what I'm going to say or what I'm going to intend when I say something, because that's going to allow us to communicate more effectively. If we're working together as a team, it really benefits me for you to be able to predict what I'm going to do. If you predict that I'm going to pass you the ball
Yeah.
in a basketball game, then that's going to help you catch the ball and it's going to help us win the game.
Yeah.
And so there are certain strategic situations where being predictable is bad,
Hmm.
and there are certain strategic situations where being predictable is good. And so you might expect this to be a relevant variable that's
Mm.
affecting people's free will intuitions,
Yeah.
such that in situations where it's more of a rock, paper, scissors
Mm.
situation, they're going to be more threatened and
Yeah.
scared of the possibility that we're just predictable meat sacks,
Yeah.
right? But if we're in a coordination teamwork situation, the fact that we're predictable meat sacks isn't going to be as threatening.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that a
So
lot.
is that a prediction that you
Yeah.
might
I
make from
love
your
that. Yeah. That's great. I
cool?
also, this also, that's fantastic. And I love that. And that's not something we'd thought about. We should do that. This also explains, like, every time we're talking, and there's like four things to talk about.
Hmm.
This thing about predictability also explains what has been a huge mystery since the beginning of the free will debate, which is that people have focused on determinism, predictability, as the
Yeah,
problem. And
yeah,
so even the first person, Epicurus, he basically came up with this idea of like quantum swerve, as people sort of jokingly kind of talk about it, which is the idea that somewhere in the microscopic or really small level, there's some indeterminism. It's like
hmm,
randomness, or it's like quantum indeterminacy or something, and that is preventing the predictability, or like that's they don't even say that. I mean, maybe they do, but it's often somehow that's saving you free will, that's keeping free will alive.
Mhm.
And people have that intuition, but again, there's no theory of why would quantum indeterminism matter for
Yeah.
free will. In fact,
Yeah.
people have made the observation that why are these people even arguing this? Because it doesn't buy you free will. A random number
Yes.
generator, if I have a random number generator in my computer, which I do, nobody thinks my computer has free will.
Right. Here's what I think is going on.
Yeah,
This is an idea that just occurred to me. What if the quantum indeterminacy thing, it buys you free will from the third person
exactly. That's right.
perspective
Exactly.
because,
That's exactly
but
right.
not the first person perspective.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
people's actions are, unpredictable, then I'm less capable of exploiting them or manipulating their neurons or whatever. But if we live in a quantum indeterminate world, then it no longer benefits me to ponder the implications and the consequences of my actions because my actions were already determined by the random quantum die rolls, right?
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. I mean, I think from the way I think about it is that that's an expression, that is the correct expression of the
Yeah.
concern about predictability, but that
Yeah.
it's all about microscopic stuff is sort of confabulation, where it's
Hmm.
just like evolved organisms are sort of like, if I'm predictable, like a tell in
Yeah.
poker,
Yeah.
then that's a problem.
Yeah.
And like even for the first person, like if you already know what I'm going to do and I know my system inside of me knows I haven't even run through the calculation,
Yeah.
then, fuck, like I'm in trouble because you already know what I'm
Yeah.
going to do.
Yeah.
So I don't, if it's bad if I'm predictable to you, and it's bad and it's a concern to you if I can predict you, right? Like,
Right.
so predictability just generally on the victim end is a bad thing, right?
Right.
So that's what I
Yeah.
think. So I think all and so this has literally been like from the beginning, people are talking about indeterminism. And people are like, well, why are we even talking about indeterminism or determinism at all? Because indeterminism doesn't get you free will. And the argument is that this evolutionary account explains why it's coming up all in free will, because it's actually the evolved system is concerned about predictability. And the scientific content about quantum states and blah, blah, blah is all just confabulation running off of the system that's just worried about being predictable.
That's fascinating. Um,
We haven't
so I
got to
want to,
mismatch yet, but
yeah,
yeah.
let's do
Yeah.
mismatch. I was just going to bring that up.
Okay.
Okay.
So let me start with analogy.
Okay.
Okay. So let's say there's a fish. Okay.
Hmm.
And a fish that it has an evolved design such that in its gills is an oxygen detector. And when that oxygen detector doesn't get oxygen, it triggers a suffocation response that it's suffocating. It wriggles, it's like in distress, right? Okay.
Hmm.
So let's say that we take this fish that has this evolved design, and let's say we're sort of weird, sadistic, or just whatever researchers, and we take this fish and we inject oxygen into its bloodstream just downstream from its gills. So the
Hmm.
gills are not getting oxygen, but we're injecting oxygen or oxygenated blood into the fish right after the gills. Okay.
Okay.
I will explain why I'm getting to this in a second. Okay. So, why am I talking about this? So, the fish is fine. The fish is
Yeah.
not suffocating. Okay.
Right.
But its evolved psychology is triggering, it's having a suffocation response. The
Right.
fish is in distress, right?
Okay.
And, but it's actually completely fine,
Hmm.
right?
It would be like if I put an electrode in the pain regions of
Yeah,
your brain and
exactly.
turned on the electrode. You're not actually in pain. Your body's not actually being damaged, but you think that you are.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So now I can ask you the question. So what we've done as experimenters is we've violated the way that the world worked up until we took we changed the state of the world for the fish. We've dissociated the cue and the concern,
Hmm.
right? The situation from the response to it. So in the
Yeah.
fish's natural ecology, when the gills lacked oxygen, that meant the fish was going to be in distress, it might die, and that's why
Yeah.
it has that response. We have
Yeah.
teased those two apart in an evolutionarily novel way. It's an
Okay.
evolutionary mismatch
Yes.
where we're keeping the fish alive. The reason for the distress response we've addressed, but yet the
Yes.
fish is still registering the suffocation response.
Hmm.
Okay. So now you could have a debate about, is the fish suffocating?
Hmm.
Now there's a good sense in which it is. It is having the experience of suffocating. It might be, if we grant what it would be like for us, it would be torture, right? The
Right.
fish is in distress. It feels like it's suffocating.
Hmm.
But there's another sense in which it's not suffocating, because the reason why it's having that experience and the reason why that system even exists is for a particular outcome in the world. And we're not letting that outcome happen. Whoops, sorry, I knocked over my bottle here. We as scientists have dissociated the normal conflation of the two, of the cue and the situation. We've teased them apart. Okay.
Hmm.
So you could have a meaningless debate, or maybe, I mean, if you just ask, is the fish suffocating, period, then you could just have an endless debate. When in
Yeah.
fact, what you're debating is, do you mean, is it having the experience based on the evolve input, or is it in fact possible? Right.
Yeah. Okay.
That that whole metaphor now applies to free will. Okay.
Okay.
So now instead of suffocation, the concern is manipulation, right?
Hmm.
And the idea is that we did not evolve in a world where we know about how the mind works. We evolved in a world where there's like tells in poker, where there's sort of habits or things that we can sort of influence one another or be influenced by one another. We did not, our
Hmm.
brains did not evolve in a world where we could know with mechanistic detail how we work. Okay. That is an
Hmm.
evolutionary novelty. Okay.
Okay.
So now the idea is that we have this evolved system that's concerned with when the things that I think I'm free to do are knowable, it's a problem, right?
Yeah.
And that concern in an evolutionary environment where there's no reductionistic science is meaningful and useful.
Yeah.
It means that, oh boy, all of a sudden I'm letting David know before I want to let him know what I'm going to do. It means
Hmm.
that David somehow knows something about me that allows him to manipulate me in a way that I'm not even aware of, right?
Hmm.
Those kinds of macroscopic, probably pretty minor, but still substantial for fitness things are really, really important.
Yeah.
And that's the reasonable concern of the am I being manipulated? Is manipulation possible concern?
Hmm.
Now we have this evolutionary novelty where either in principle or in practice, and maybe not actually, but we know enough now to poke on and manipulate everything.
Yeah.
And if you don't think that's true now, which I don't yet, in principle, like, if science progresses, we might at some point.
Hmm.
Um, or let's just stipulate that that will happen. Then this gets back to like, where do you get off the train, right? In principle, like, when do you think it's a concern? When are you worried about it? And the idea is that we are sort of like the floundering fish. And this is where the 42 answer comes in, which is that the claim, and we can start wrapping up all the dangling pieces now, the claim is that free will, when people talk about does free will exist, yes or no, it's a little bit like arguing is the fish suffocating. There's a real sense in which free will exists, in the sense of it is a psychological representation of can I get up earlier in the morning?
Hmm.
That is a coherent, reasonable thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's different than healing the broken bone. And in that respect, I don't agree with like Sam Harris or I keep blanking on,
Greg Caruso. Yeah.
well, Greg Crusoe, but also
Oh,
Robert
Rob
Sapolsky.
Sapolsky.
Yeah, Robert
Yeah.
Sapolsky. I don't agree with them where, Sam Harris is like particularly egregious where he'll just say like it's not even coherent. Like, come on, grow up, kids. And
Hmm.
I don't agree with that. So
Yeah.
so I do think free will is real in the sense of it's an evolved representation talking about a coherent thing. Is it up
Yeah.
to the state of these planning or means end systems?
Mm,
But there is another sense in which, then, if you take this evolutionary novelty of knowing everything that we know, then the question becomes, well, what do you mean by free will? Is free will or is manipulation in principle possible? And if that's what you mean by it, you get off the train early, right? And you say there's no free will. So that's Sam Harris or Robert Sapolsky. Then there's some people who sort of say, well, maybe not in principle, but like maybe once we know exactly how a system works, we have the technology. I get off there, and those people would be sort of incompatibilists. So when you know more about how a system works, then you say, oh, we don't have free will for that anymore. That's done. So like if I knew how let's just pretend like there was a system that was like the decision making system in your head and scientists like announce we know everything about how the decision making system works. There would be a class of people who are like, well, that means we don't have free will anymore, right? Even though nobody
yeah.
poked on it, just knowing
Yeah.
enough about it is enough for those people to then be concerned, right?
Mm,
And then there's like people like me who are like, well, no, we still have free will. I'm compatibilist. It's a levels of analysis thing, right? Where you can describe the software, but it doesn't make the intentional level phenomenon any less real. So that's the software that makes it possible to make a decision. There's no problem there. However, if a neuroscientist poked on the software, then I would be saying, well, yeah, no, that person didn't have free will in that situation because that's the neuroscientist poked on their software. So that's getting off at the last station, station three, when like it's manipulation in practice. And I think everybody would get off then. So those are all about the concern about manipulation. Then it's just this question of like, how quickly do you get off the train? But the thing is that that's the evolved concern of the psychology. And because we never evolved in a world to have this much knowledge, there's just this individual difference along this continuum of
mm,
like, how soon do you get worried about manipulation? Is it when it's in principle, when it's more concretely in principle or actually happening? And so that's the sort of
mm,
evolutionary mismatch piece where there's a sense in which people who say we don't have free will are right because they're sort of saying, look, our evolved psychology is concerned about manipulation. And is manipulation possible? Yeah, right. But it's again, there's like no facts of the matter about it. It's sort of like, is this fish suffocating? There's a sense
right.
in which it is, in a sense in which it isn't. And there's a sense in
Mm,
which free will is real, in the sense of I currently enjoy free will. It's in a coherent, evolved representation. And then, however, if you get off the train right away, there's a sense in which you're right. Like in principle, I could be manipulated. And if that's what you mean by it, then you're right. I don't. So we can both be right. We're just talking about different things, right? Um, and if
mm,
you get off the train later, then we might both say I have free will because nobody has been poking on my systems, unless we find out otherwise. So the basic idea is that there's actually been a bunch of different issues all smooshed together. And the idea is that if you tease these all apart, so you tease apart, are you talking about an evolved representation that is distinguishing between like the difference between getting up in the morning or breaking a bone? Then yes, free will is real, right? It's also then
mm.
the free will representation itself is for the range of circumstances that we evolve to deal with. Like, are you currently manipulating me? I don't think so. Like I have free will, right?
Yeah.
So this is why I think the evolutionary mismatch is really important because there's a sense in which you can say free will is real because, the fish is floundering, like it's experiencing, it's suffocating. Um, but there's another sense in which like you could manipulate my behavior, or maybe you have, and that's a sense in which you don't have free will.
Mm. I w- I wonder if the relevant individual difference variable that's shaping these intuitions is the sense of ownership and how expansive that sense of ownership is. So on the one hand, you could, or the sense of self,
Mm,
let's say. So on the one hand, you could
yeah.
have a very narrow conception of self where it's just the conscious me that makes decisions. And the stuff that's unconscious, my genes, my habits that I acquired as a child,
Yeah.
that's not me.
Mm.
Just the me that's conscious right now making decisions, that's the only thing that's me.
Mm.
Or you could take a more expansive definition of self and say it's all me. My genes, my
Yeah.
upbringing,
Yeah,
my
that's a
habits,
really
what's
interesting
going
idea.
on,
Yeah, yeah,
at
yeah.
the unconscious level, that's
Hmm.
all me.
Yeah.
And so for some people, when you explain to them that unconscious forces or genetic forces or childhood forces are shaping your decisions, that reads to them, that
Mm.
reads to their evolved mind as I'm being manipulated.
Yeah.
I'm being manipulated by something that is not me,
Yeah.
that is alien.
Hmm.
These genes that I have, they're not me.
Yeah.
These unconscious motivations and drives, they're not me, right? These habits that I've acquired, they're not me.
That's right.
And so they register that as manipulation and that I don't have free will. It's directly analogous to I've been manipulated by an evil neuroscientist who
Correct.
did brain surgery on me without my consent,
Yeah.
except it's not the neuroscientist, it's evolution
Yeah.
or it's
Exactly.
the unconscious parts of the brain or whatever.
Hmm.
And so maybe the relevant distinction is, do I view evolution and genes and unconscious brain processes, do I view that stuff as the type of thing that could manipulate me? uh, as something that's outside of me or
Yes.
external to me?
Yeah.
Or do I view it as me, as
Yeah.
a part of me?
Yeah.
In which case, it's not manipulation, it's just me
Exactly.
making a decision.
It's funny you say that because how I got into this was from modularity, because the
Mm,
modularity argument was what Fodor meant by module was the stuff that wasn't me.
yeah.
And so he was drawing a
Yes.
line around and he was making an argument that, like, hey, if you think it's all the homunculus or you inside your head, guess what? You're wrong. There's like stuff on the periphery, like perception, where you can't go in and control. You can't go in and change the fact that you see a visual illusion, even if you know explicitly that the lines are the same length or whatever. Yeah. Um,
Hmm.
you can't control it. And so that was actually my foray into free will because I was like, look, we just went through this whole modular with me with Annie Wirtz. Like we went through this whole thing where what the modularity debate was about like this levels of analysis confusion where like Fodor was operating at this intentional level where there's like the you and then the stuff that isn't you, exactly what you're saying. And then people were just drawing the lines of like evolution is not you. It's like the thing that causes you to want to eat, sugar when you don't want to, right?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
it makes you want to sleep with the person even though you don't think you should, right? Like it's the poking
Yes.
on the homunculus stuff.
Right.
And that's the way a lot of popularization understands it. And then there was another
Yes.
version, which was the quote unquote sophisticated version, which I am part of, which is sort of understanding evolution at the functional level, which is just like
Hmm.
everything you do, like the
Yeah.
decision making or whatever, it's all just software and we just do the evolved software. And so it's not a you versus your mechanism, it's just mechanisms all the way down. And so
Mm.
this was the argument was there's a levels of analysis confusion where people were operating at the intentional level like Fodor, invoking a you, defining mechanisms as opposed to the you. And that's not what evolutionary psychologists meant at all. They were operating at a lower level, at the level of mechanisms.
Mm.
And then so we did that for modularity and said, like, that's why people are having this back and forth debate. It's just people missing each other at what level they're just talking about modules. Fodor meant module meaning not you. And a lot of people meant module is not you. But most evolutionary psychologists or adaptationists meant just modules are just bits of functions at the functional level, at the software level. It has nothing to do with the stuff that's independent of you one way or another. They're using the same word to operate at two different levels. That was the argument of the modularity paper. And the idea was sort of that I looked over at free will and was like, well, this looks very similar. I just went through this whole thing with modularity and look, people are talking about free will as being incompatible with mechanisms. Some people are, and some people aren't. So maybe it's that people who are incompatibilists are like Fodor. They're operating at the intentional level. They're sort of saying, look,
Mm.
there's me and my mechanisms, and I'm free, but my mechanisms aren't. So I'm an incompatibilist. But then if there's other people who are sort of like, well, yeah, you are made up of mechanisms. It's sort of like the evolutionary psychologists. So those are the compatibilists, right? And so that's how I got into the whole debate was realizing that this level, this deeper structural level, it was a very similar confusion, a levels of analysis confusion.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, but that was before then I got into the mismatch stuff and the figuring that out. But that was the beginning of me getting into it. So you're exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. It almost strikes me that the mismatch aspect is not the unprecedented level of manipulatability. manipulability. Um, but the lack of clarity about what the self is and the unprecedented insight into
Mm,
aspects of ourself that are not currently conscious.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's a good
because
point. Yeah, we did not evolve for that level of, yeah, that's a really good way to think about it. Yeah, that's true.
Right, like what to call the self, or like how
Yeah,
expansive or narrow. That wasn't really a relevant
no,
or distinction that would have been selection pressures to make sure we get
exactly.
that conceptualization
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
And so we're free to vary. Some have
yeah,
an expansive definition of self, some have a narrow definition of
yeah,
self, and 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 the mechanism in some sense is operating correctly. Like it's designed to detect threats to the self or
yeah,
manipulative attempts to exploit the self. And it just depends on how you think of the self.
yeah,
If you think of the self as the narrow conscious you at this time, then you really are being manipulated by your unconscious forces and by your genes
yeah,
and by your upbringing.
yeah,
But if you view the self expansively, then you're not being manipulated by those things because those things are you. And so we evolved to detect, potential manipulation. And if neuroscientists really did um, fully unravel everything going on in the brain and could manipulate us by, giving us pills or brain surgery or planting an electrode in
yeah,
our brains or whatever, if they could do all those things, that really would be a legitimate case of
yeah,
manipulation that we would have good
hmm,
reason to worry about.
yeah,
And that wouldn't be mismatch. That would be
yeah,
a rational
yeah. That's right. That's
response.
getting
Like,
off at step three. Yeah, that's right. Where
yeah,
everybody lines up that that's not free will. That's right. Yeah,
right. But the
yeah,
people who get off at step one, um, they're already being manipulated by the evil neuroscientist in the form of their unconscious mind, in the form of their genes, in the
correct,
form
correct.
of their childhood. Like
Yes.
the evil neuroscientist is already in
Yeah,
them, and
yeah,
it's already manipulating
yeah.
them,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so the difference is just, what are we
Mm.
calling the evil neuroscientist and what are we
Yeah,
not calling the evil
exactly. Yeah,
neuroscientist?
yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is the answer to what is free will. It's that you don't and this is why the answer is 42, where the whole question assumed that the answer wouldn't be it's a representation of an evolved organism, right?
Yeah.
And the idea is it is, and that's the answer.
Yeah.
And then once you understand that that's the answer, then the question of in a particular case, is this an instance of free will? You can understand why there could be different
Mhm.
individuals coming to different answers. So
Yeah.
the level of invariance, as we talked about in earlier podcasts, to the answer, what is free will, is not what people imagined it to be. This is why 42 is apt. It's not a perspective independent definition. It's not a evolved system independent definition out in the world. It's a representation of from caused by an adaptation, and depending on different things about that organism. And because of this evolutionary mismatch, the same content in the world will arrive at different conclusions about whether or not free will exists or not, or holds in this case or not. So it changes the enterprise from deciding what out in the world counts as free will to understanding why and the psychology of different evolved critters are arriving at different conclusions. And the thing that is predictable and deterministic is the software that we're characterizing in our answer of what free will is. So we have a theory, it's almost like a meta theory of everything we've been talking about is this is what the scientific study of free will is. There's all this Lebet stuff about
Mhm.
like this classic study where the question is there neurocognitive signature of making a decision before you experiencing making your decision?
Yeah.
And this account says that that's not the study of free will at all.
Yeah.
That's the expression of the concern of the free will system, looking
Y-
at how the neurocognitive systems of decision making, which won't tell you
Yeah.
that that Lebet stuff will not tell us anything. It won't settle the matter at all.
Yes.
And in fact, what the neurocognitive study of free will is the neurocognitive study of a system that is representing, for example, the difference between getting up early in the morning and healing a broken bone. That's concerned about manipulation and deciding whether or not these circumstances count as this system should be concerned about the possibility of manipulation. So this suggests a completely different way to study free will and a completely
Yeah.
different way to understand what free will is.
Yeah. no, with the LeBay stuff, like it fits what I was saying earlier. So if the neurosignature of making a decision happens before you're consciously aware of making that decision, you can interpret that in one of two ways. In one way, the neurosignature is this alien force that's
Yeah,
manipulating you. You're
yeah,
categorizing this as a case of manipulation,
yeah,
in which case I don't have free will.
yeah, totally.
Another way to see it is no, that neurosignature is a part of me. That's
Yeah,
just the way I make decisions.
yeah,
It's not manipulating me, it is me,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And so it depends on how narrowly or expansively your definition of the self
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where you get off on the train, I like what you're
Yeah.
saying. And another way to put it is
Yeah.
where you get off on the train. And that's why it's not going to settle it for anybody. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So,
So,
how are you approaching testing these ideas empirically? That's another thing I was
yeah.
curious about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so one is we're testing this individual difference thing of like, where do you get off the train, which I really like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And that's something we're going to see. And we've already, um, you can sort of you can kind of predict where people are going to get off the train. It seems to be pretty stable. I mean, I don't want to speak too strongly about it, but we're that's one aspect is just sort of giving people asking people giving people scenarios and saying is there free will or not, and then and then looking at, for example, are people who get off at step one, are they more likely to confuse levels of analysis, for example, right?
Mm,
And
cool.
but that's one thing is you can just document that difference. And I think uh, in the context of the existing literature, I think, and this is not part of the theory, this is just my own personal thinking. I suspect that the compatibilist incompatibilist distinction is conflating those three different more stable individual differences. And I think that in analogously, like what you were saying about like, people's training on as to whether or not your genes are part of you or not, and if you lump that in or not, these things should all better explain compatibilism or incompatibilism or moving people around in that way, right? Um,
Mm,
so that's one element. The other thing is just sort of looking at is just testing this idea that the efficacy of intentional intervention, like the question of like, does free will track the extent
mm,
to which you believe you could sort of force yourself or convince yourself to do something, right?
yeah.
And is that something too that's a prediction, right?
So
That's
you're looking at the degree to which people say that this person has free will and seeing if that correlates
yeah, or
with
first
the degree,
person, yeah,
or so are you doing third and first
yeah,
person
first and
types
third
of free will?
person, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Cool.
So that's one part. So basically, it would be like, could you convince yourself to do something in this situation? And
Okay.
then at a later point, it's like, do you have free will in this situation? And those two should sort
Got
of
it.
track each other, but it shouldn't track other things like how desirable would it be? Um,
Ah, cool.
the other thing we're doing too, and this is the other kind of funny part of thinking, taking this evolutionary step back, is determinism has always been brought up for reasons we talked about, like predictability or manipulation. But
Yeah.
one thing people haven't really realized is that, like, for example, like superhero movies have just as much to do with free will as neuroscientists implanting a brain.
Yeah.
Superhuman or yeah, superhuman abilities or like the ability to like read minds. People
Yeah.
love that, right? You're like,
Yeah.
that's sign me up, hook it to my
Yeah.
veins, right?
Yeah.
And that's a case of instinct blindness, where in fact that's more determinism in the world, right? Like you've injected a new deterministic relationship that didn't exist before. But David, you can now read my mind. And if
Yeah.
and if I tell you you can do that, you love that, right? And I
Yeah.
hate it because for me it's manipulation.
Mm,
But if you're my
yeah.
friend or my
Yeah.
partner, I might get more. And so that's a whole other part where we're actually teasing apart what had been conflated, which is determinism where you're the victim of it, where you're the patient as opposed
Mm,
to the agent of determinism, and then
mm,
manipulating social distance. So this is the other thing where the literature, because it's been so implicitly focused on the concern about manipulation, that it didn't take a step back and think, well, what does determinism mean? And what happens when you inject new determinism into the world or new deterministic relationships? There's a whole category that people should not only not mind, but love. Maybe they won't admit to it, but like, could you just, would it be great for you to just like fly anywhere you wanted? That'd be awesome, right? Like, so
yeah.
people fantasize about that. There's a whole genre of fiction that's about the acquisition of new deterministic relationships that didn't exist before. Like, I can make fire come out of my arms when I want to. It would be bad
Yeah.
if it was like uncontrollable, right? Like, I would
Yeah.
burn my family. That would be
Yeah.
horrible, right? So,
Yeah.
like, But like having new things under your control is
Yeah.
awesome for an evolved organism, right? This
Yeah.
is also the psychology of free will. So the psychology of free will doesn't just become like worrying about neuroscientists poking on your brain. It also becomes the psychology of power and
Yeah.
capability. And we're getting into this idea of sort of the representation of what's possible. And there's that's a whole new interesting area that's getting into what we started with, which is sort of like if you took a fox and a bird and you mixed up their planning systems, they would do very poorly because the bird can fly, but the fox can't, you know? So if
Yeah.
like the bird's like, oh, there's a berry across the canyon, you know, I'm just going to go over that way. And if it was in the fox would die, right? Because the fox
Yeah.
can't fly. So like the ability to represent what you can do and really like it when you can do new stuff you thought you couldn't do, that's
Hmm.
awesome, right?
Yeah.
And so like the representation of what you can do, and it's not trivial because it changes. Because like when you're a baby, can't do very much. Sometimes you get injured, sometimes you get sick. Day to day, it changes. Some things you can do because other people can help you. So it's not even intrinsic within your body envelope. You can be hindered. You can, you know, like you'd be tired. So like I think the free will thing is also a part of a much larger set of adaptations for sort of representing what's possible and constantly monitoring that and also then assigning valuation to have I increased what I'm able to do or have I decreased it? You know, and that shouldn't be value neutral. Like I should love it when I can do something I thought I couldn't, or if see you do something and I'm like, oh, maybe I can do that too. You know, like maybe I can catch 20 fish too. A lot of advertising literally is like, here's a thing you can do that you thought you couldn't do. You know, like we should be very
Mm.
attracted to this. Like that's a huge swath of advertising is either showing somebody doing something that you think you want to do, like, oh my gosh, that person did a backflip. Maybe I should drink a Red Bull. Or, you know,
Yeah.
like the like, have you ever I gave a talk on this and I looked up old it was like an AT&T commercial where it was like, have you ever driven across country without looking at a map? You will. And it was like, and it was just showing like a really like crappy, like 8-bit, you know, GPS, you know, and it was like
Yeah.
sent a fax from the beach. You will, you know, and so humans just love, we're just artifact using monkeys, you know, we're just like, give me a new tool. That's awesome, you know, and a lot of advertising is that. And I think that's part of free will too.
Yeah, it's also meta advertising. So if I'm trying to advertise to you my ability to advertise your product, I'm going to want to appeal to all the priming research and saying I can subliminally make people buy
Yeah.
your soda or whatever, and that's going to make you hire me.
Yeah.
So I want to inflate the power I have to manipulate
Yeah.
people against their
Yeah.
their will or beyond their consciousness, because that makes me a more attractive advertiser for
Yes.
you. Like I have tremendous powers over the human mind. Hire me to advertise your soda. The same thing applies, I think, to social scientists.
Yeah.
It's attractive, or neuroscientists. It's attractive to say that, yeah, if the more knowledge we gain in this area, the more we will have magical
Yeah.
powers
Totally.
to just like
Yeah.
manipulate people or
Yeah.
perform Jedi mind tricks on
Yeah.
them.
Exactly.
Fund my research,
Yeah. Yeah. No, we
right?
talked about that early on. Yeah. Yeah. Just
Yeah.
the selective regime, the institutional selection pressure selects for a version of psychology that says we are the special knowledge holders and sort of the
Yeah.
guardians of the flame of the real engine of decision making. And corporation, if you want us to channel it towards your lucrative means, let us know and we'll help you out. Yeah.
Yeah, or political
Yeah. No,
campaigner, if you
totally. Yeah.
want us
Yeah.
to help,
Yeah.
get votes for
Exactly.
your candidate,
Yeah.
hire us, the
Yep.
psychologists who know
Yeah.
how to do Jedi mind
Exactly.
tricks.
But
Who, I think it explains why the unconscious priming stuff was so
oh yeah.
attractive and
Yeah.
compelling to the field,
Yeah.
why we went down this dumb
Yeah.
rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It's like it's a really enticing and
Yes.
exciting idea
Yeah.
that you could manipulate someone's judgments by like making them hold a warm cup of coffee,
Yeah. No,
like
if you basically snip out, if you consider like this issue of what's under people's control and
yeah,
not, and that issue and scientists dealing with that, almost all public discourse about psychology is about that. And it's
yeah,
because of this psychology. Like I would argue that's an expression of this psychology. I mean, it's almost like too narrow to call it about free will, right? It's sort of like
yeah,
where I started from, but it's this much bigger set of adaptations about control and freedom and autonomy and manipulation and coercion that there should be super strong selection pressures on. And it's a good example of like there's still really low hanging fruit in adaptationism or evolutionary psychology. Like, not only is there a lot of stuff to study that isn't just mating, I mean, of course, even within mating, as we talk about, like it's overemphasizing sex differences, is like the evolved psychology of like what's possible. Like, how do I represent what I can do? I don't think there's any work on that. Like the evolved psychology of have I been manipulated or how autonomous am I? How does that represented? Like, there's not really much work on that. I mean, Chris von Ruden alluded to that. That's an important like the sense of autonomy, and people who are in egalitarian societies really value not feeling like they're indebted to people. But that's about as far as we've gotten. Like, there's not task analyses of these things. There's not experimental work as far as I know. So there's just a ton to do. But that's free will
Yeah.
in 2 hours.
Yeah. I mean, we covered a lot. I mean, is there anything
I'm
we
t-
didn't cover? Is
I'm t-
there?
yeah, no, I feel like I mean, I think there's a lot to sort of, I mean, there's so much philosophy about this, and you could kind of go through and sort of like, we talked about like reasons responsiveness is like one definition. You can kind of go through. What I like about this project is nobody ends up getting looking super stupid or super smart. It's
Yeah.
sort of like every position in the free will debate, even like Sam Harris, who frankly I'm like annoyed with because he's just so like confident about free will is incoherent. Like there's a
Yeah.
sense in which he's right, right? But like even
Yeah.
though like but I think he's like kind of too strong about it. But there's a sense in which he is right, and even incompatibilists or compatibilists, sorry, would often still be like evoking like or appealing to like a self, like kind of going back up to the intentional level when talking about free
Yes.
will. And even like the Dennett and Caruso thing, like as much as Dennett kind of originated like the levels of analysis idea, he had the design stance, the intentional stance, the physical stance, the Caruso and Dennett book, to just wrap that up, like really what that whole book is arguing is the efficacy of different kinds of intervention. Like Caruso's like, we shouldn't do an intentional intervention. We should just change circumstances or the system, like not, we shouldn't intervene upon the means ends psychology of the person. That's like archaic, right? And
Yeah.
Dennett is saying we should. That's the whole book. You don't even need to read the book.
Yeah.
Like that's actually what the whole debate is about. But I think you can see that once you have this framework, right?
Yeah.
Like, but that's what they were debating. So like that's another thing. Like the thing I'm saying now to sum up is you can go back through the debate armed with this adaptationist approach, and you can basically see the value and the perspective that is correct within a delineated scope that in every area of the argument. You can see in what sense the libertarians are correct, which is that if you're deterministic, you're not free. There's a sense in which that's true. Like we can understand now why any human would think that and say that. We can also understand that with a sense in which it's not true, right? Um,
Yeah.
so I like that about this project that like a lot of adaptationism, it doesn't wade into the muck and mire of the debate, but it takes a step back and it's like, you're all kind of right and you're all kind of wrong. Let's think about this just from a different perspective, and we can understand the value and the reason why everybody is saying what they're saying. And it all fits into a bigger picture. And like the thing I really like is that all of the arguments, there's a theory now of why those arguments are being put forward. Why are philosophers talking about the possibility of neuroscientists manipulating people? There's no theory for why they're doing that. They just do it in their books. This is a
Yeah.
theory of that. Why are we talking about quantum serve? There's no theory of that. There's even theorizing about why it doesn't work, and it's a mystery.
Yeah.
Well, this is a theory of that. So I like that this provides a meta theory explaining and contextualizing all the arguments into a coherent whole.
Hmm. It almost suggests to me that all the philosophical debate about whether or not we have free will is kind of pointless and futile, and we should stop arguing about it. Would you go so far as to make that claim?
Um, Yes and no. No, in the
Okay.
following sense. I don't think me, the lazy adaptationist, could have arrived at this without all that work people doing. Like,
Yeah,
people worked
that's true.
really hard to interrogate their own intuitions and make
Yeah.
conceptual distinctions that then I can sort of, in an armchair way, say, I mean, it was hard work on my part too, but like to just sort
Yeah.
of be like, what's the adaptationism of all of this argument? And without
Yeah.
all that hard work, like really hard work and very smart people, you couldn't do that. So in that sense, I
Yeah.
don't think it was inevitable, or like I don't think it was a waste of time at all. Um,
Right. But do you think it's a waste of time moving forward? Should
yeah,
we continue to
probably. Yeah,
debate the
yeah, yeah,
question? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think
Yeah.
this changes. I do think like this might be wrong. I don't
Yeah.
think we have a clear idea. Like we even you and I were hemming and hawing about like, is it a goal system? Is it a means end? Like, I don't know.
Right.
Maybe I don't like that's, I've only gotten so far in this and other people should step in and we'll be
Yeah.
publishing papers presenting these ideas. But like, so this is not the last word. This is the beginning. But I do think this is an example of adaptationism fundamentally changing the trajectory of a research program. And I do think the study of free will should be really different than it has been since Epicurus till now.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, would you go so far as to say that adaptationism should play this kind of role in all philosophical debates, that we should ultimately try to understand what adaptations and byproducts are leading to the intuitions that we have in these philosophical debates? And once we understand that, in some important way, the debate will dissolve or resolve.
Yeah, or be transformed into a
Yeah.
different understanding. That's right. And it's a
Yeah.
different way to think about what philosophy has been doing, and that I think a lot
Yeah.
of philosophers would represent or recognize or even embrace, even if they were not coming from an adaptationist perspective, which is again understanding that what I'm doing as a philosopher is a readout of this evolved being.
Yeah.
And all I can do is sort of document as best I can one coherent way or perspective from this perspective. And then others can sort of stitch those all together into a more scientific account, like we're doing here for free will. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think this should always be an enterprise, and I do think it will. Adaptationism will, I think, completely transform the way we think about philosophy, and it will make what philosophy is. I don't think it'll stop doing it won't stop philosophy at all. I think it'll actually
Yeah.
invigorate it in the sense of it contextualizes what that enterprise is. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like philosophy is really just psychology but it thinks it's physics. You know, like it thinks it's delving into the nature of reality. No, it's just delving into your own evolved intuitions as an ape, right? And
Yeah,
just mapping out all the different
yeah,
intuitive responses you have to
yeah, yeah,
different
yeah,
fanciful scenarios. You're not
yeah,
actually getting into reality. You're just getting into the
yeah,
way the human
yeah.
mind works.
And but
And once
I
we
would,
realize
yeah,
that, like it will help us understand how
yeah,
reality
yeah,
works, because then we can, figure out like which of our intuitions we
yeah,
should actually trust and which of them actually make sense and cohere with our best picture of empirical reality and so forth. So
yeah.
I think yeah, you're right that it should invigorate philosophy.
Yeah, no, and I think that point I think was already made by philosophers even before Darwin,
Yeah.
right? Like so
Yes.
I think this is just sort of validating or making concrete adding Darwinianism or
Yeah.
adaptationism
Yeah.
specifically into this enterprise. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, like the intersection of adaptationism and like philosophy, it's not something that I thought I would do. But I guess I'm doing it. But like, it hasn't. I mean, we're about to write these papers. We're submitting these papers. We've been trying to publish these papers. It should happen, and apparently, I'm one of the people doing it. Michael and I, and other people, hopefully. But yeah, no. I mean, it's a new, exciting connection between evolution and other ways of thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's incredibly valuable. It has inspired me personally. Like, your work on this has inspired me to do the same thing with the debate over consciousness.
Oh,
I
awesome.
think the debate about
Yeah.
consciousness can be uh, transformed in a similar way by taking an adaptationist analysis to what the underlying conceptual machinery is, what is causing us to be so confused about this debate, and as soon as we understand that, the debate about consciousness and how we're consciousness and what animals are conscious, that it will be utterly transformed once we understand the intuitions that are giving rise to this and what it means to an evolved organism for something to be conscious versus not. And so maybe we'll do a future episode on consciousness, but
Yeah, I was gonna say we have
yeah,
2 minutes. I'm sure you can do it 2 minutes.
yeah.
Yeah.
We'll
A
save it for another
hubris. So
episode.
yeah,
That'll be
exactly.
that'll
Yeah,
be your
that'd be
teaser
awesome.
for
Yeah,
future
yeah,
future
yeah.
episodes.
Exactly. That sounds
Yeah.
great. But David, this was great. I honestly I was sort of dreading this because I don't know why, but I have sort of like this. I'm doing free will, and I'm like,
Yeah.
it's like it's sort of I think what it is there in behaviorism, there was this thing of when pigeons or rats would get conditioned to many lever presses before they would get a reward, and then they got a reward, they would sort of be reluctant to start pushing the lever again because they knew it was a lot of work. And I think that's
Mhm.
me with free will because it's sort of like it's a long exposition. Like we spent two
Yeah,
hours, and like
totally.
it's not, like alliance tracking. It's like yeah, cooperation, competition, track keys up. Like
Yeah.
I could do an elevator pitch, and maybe I will say, like, to an adaptationist credit, like I think this is really changes the way I think about this, and I think it will change the science of it. And it's cool you can do it in 2 hours, but it's still like a couple.
Yeah.
It's not a 1 minute thing. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I often experience that frustration a lot myself when people ask me about like my work or like what I'm writing about, what my paper's about, or what
yeah,
my theory of humor is. I'm like,
yeah.
oh, do you have 2 hours?
Yeah. And the
Like,
1 minute version, I'm
yeah,
like embarrassed because I'm like, yeah, I'm doing
yeah,
free will. And it's like, oh God. Because like,
yeah,
then there's just a lot of the shoddy or like, it's just so derivative. It's the easiest thing it's like free will is the canonical, like self-important, but sort of paper thin analysis, right?
yeah.
Anyway,
Cool.
yeah. But thank you, David. It was nice to get it off my chest and think through this aloud. And I really like the idea of sort of the mismatch, especially being like sort of where the you and the mechanisms and the variability is. That's a really nice
Mm,
new idea as a result of this conversation. So thank you.
yeah. No, you're welcome. Thank you for enlightening me on a topic that I didn't know much about. I mean, I was interested philosophically in the debate, and you helped inform the philosophical debate in a really profound way. And I just find the topic intrinsically interesting. So yeah, I had a great time.
Yeah, thanks. And I have no idea what the answer is, whether you have it or not. It depends. It's the
It's
Clark Barrett answer. It
the
depends.
correct answer is who cares?
42. No, that's right. Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
it's yeah.
that's a good answer.
There's no right answer is
Yeah.
the right
Or there's
answer.
a couple
Yeah,
answers and yeah,
yeah. Depending
the
on what
question.
situation you're in, or yeah,
Exactly.
totally.
Okay. All right. Well, good, David. Thank you so much.
Yep.
All
Thanks,
right.
man.
Okay. Bye. Well, David, I am pretty tired from talking about free will because I was the guest this episode.
That's true. And you as the listener, um, if you're still listening, you made the free choice to continue listening. We didn't hold a gun to your head. Something about this must have drawn you to the topic. So, if you made the free choice to continue listening, I would suggest intervening intentionally on your psychology and getting you to make the free choice to recommend us, talk about us on social media, visit us on Patreon, say a kind word or two, email us with ideas for topics or questions. Anything else people can do, Dave, or did I cover it all?
To just refer to some previous bits, they could also send you either a fanny pack or either of us French fries.
That's right. Ideally, French fries inside the fanny pack. It's a pretty good vessel for French fries. I like to eat my French fries out of my fanny pack.
It's a great image to spend the rest of your week with before until the next episode. Oh,
All
that was
right.
great. It's fun to laugh. It feels good to laugh. Okay, thank you everybody for listening, and have a nice week.
Yep.